starting off with my first question for you, Ben. Um, when people bring up creating a website, right? They usually bring up SEO. So what is SEO, first of all, and then how do you implement it? Because it seems like it's this thing that everyone talks about, but like it's just there. It's like, ooh, SEO, and it makes you sound fancy.
Yeah, so SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. So think of your website like it's your storefront. If you got terrible customer service or nobody knows about you, no one comes to your store. So SEO is like customer service between your store or your website and Google or other search engines but other search engines don't matter. Google are the busybodies throughout the neighborhood who tell people about your website. So if you don't give them good content to talk about, they're not going to pass your website along to potential customers. So how this works is Google is what they do what they call crawling your website. So they're going through the actual like code of your website probably once every week or every other week, like just for the heck of it, to gather data on what your website is. And it's logarithms and it's codes. This is not people, this is just computers going through your website. And it's deciding whether your website matches certain search criteria. So when people search X product, if you sell X product and the words are not built on your website correctly, people aren't going to find your website. So this is not this have nothing to do with paying anybody to do anything, unless of course you're paying someone like us to build the SEO of your website. It is a free thing that most companies can do on their own. They could just have one of their staff members or they themselves can do. Just build out basic, very clear statements that talk directly about what it is that you do. If you're geographically located somewhere, like you have a storefront that you need people to get to, or you have a service you offer in a particular area, you need to reference that area. You need to reference the cities that you do business in. You need to reference the counties that you're in, the state that you're in. So Google knows that when I search, I need a carpenter in Minneapolis. I don't get the carpenter in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. I need the carpenter in Minneapolis. I need a list of them in Minneapolis to do work for me. So if your website doesn't state you're a carpenter in Minneapolis, or you haven't clearly demarcated where you do business, Google probably won't throw you at the top. It'll know you're a carpenter, but it won't know where to put you. Other things that play into SEO is descriptions that don't actually show up on your website. Most websites, when you go to build them on most platforms like Wix or Squarespace, they'll have what they call SEO descriptions. They'll even have tabs in there where it guides you in building the SEO of your page. Descriptions that only Google sees and that you don't actually find on your website. Now, what you don't want in SEO is content that is words that have nothing to do with your content. So if people are coming to your website and they don't get what Google thought your content was referring to, it'll actually start to rank you lower and lower. It knows whether people like your website or not. It's keeping that data. So you need to make sure that you're providing what you're promising on your website, because the Google's computers are thinking. How you label your page, how you label each page is important. Keywords need to be in page titles. How you label your graphics can also be important. That's also something that Google's bots will go through when they crawl your website. So don't just throw generic or just a bunch of random letters on your images. Title them a very specific way, because that's another thing that it might crawl. Now, that being said, none of this matters that as much as it could matter if you don't do basic analytics. If you don't track analytics, you have no idea what's happening. Your SEO is just you stabbing in the dark. So you need to go open up a free Google Analytics account and link it to your website for free and get all of the data for free. They don't charge anything because they want you to use Google Ads. That's where they make most of their money. So if you're not collecting your analytics, which is free, don't do anything but Google Analytics. Unless, of course, it's a very fancy company and you are talking to a sales rep that's explaining why they're going to do something better than Google Analytics. Don't play with anything else. Right now, just focus on Google Analytics and track what progress is coming from your website.
So, what's some of the specific data that Google Analytics tells you, and how does that data connect to SEO?
Yeah, it tells you where people are looking at your website, like what country they're in, what city, state they're in, where in the country, what time did they look. So all of that data feeds into, am I actually getting my audience to look at my website? How long were they at my website? That feeds back into how you created your page. If you create your page funny, you might get people coming to your website, but they don't do anything on your website. They don't fill out any forms, they don't buy any products. So you need to make sure that you're going through all of the analytics. Now, that's just a brief overview of what they'll do for you. If you really want to know about analytics, another thing they offer for free is courses on their website. I think it's like Google University or something, or Google Ads University. They'll teach you everything about Google Analytics for free. So this is something I'm going to give you a brief overview for. They're willing to tell you everything that their software does without charging you a dime, and that's something you can add to your resume because they'll give you a certificate.
Ooh, but that certification and those things, it takes time. I'll tell you. I've done stuff for like HubSpot, and oh my lord, it takes time. So in Google Analytics, does it tell you what keywords people are searching for to get to your site at all?
Yeah, I believe you can look that up. There's certain words that are coming up in the searches people are searching. So they'll search X phrase and then they'll land on your website. Google will track what kind of searches were done that your website came up in. So you know when you're going back through the SEO of your page, you don't want you go back and be like, gee, I didn't mean to make that word very important, but apparently it is. Or I wanted this word to be what people need to find me as. So if I'm going in there and I'm getting people who want this service, X service, but I offer Y service, and then I'm not wording something right on my website. I'm not being specific enough. So yeah, that's really important to know what searches you're coming up in.
Gotcha. And then um, with those keywords that you kind of find out that, or key phrases and words that you're ranking for and that are kind of helping you, um, should you be going back in and putting more of those keywords in there? Does Google look favorably upon that? Do they frown upon that? Like, what's kind of the protocol for once you figure out what your bread and butter is for keywords that Google is ranking you for?
Yeah, Google, like I said, it's all their computers. It's not their people. So if you're leaning into the keywords that work for your website, as long as they're actually getting what they want when they come to your website, and Google doesn't think you're just a dud that people aren't actually interacting with, then by all means lean into the words that get people to your website, and then actually deliver what you promise.
So I shouldn't be taking that keyword and put it like 100 or 1,000 times on that one page, then, huh? Probably not a good idea. So in relation to SEO, blogs are kind of one of those ways that, you really build SEO. So how does that work? How does a blog actually help you build SEO on your site?
Yeah, so blogs are just endless, what we call crawlable material. Just you get to decide how you want it worded. You can use words repeatedly. You can use certain phrases that you want people to search and find your website. So when you build out good blog material, and it's actually decent blog material, it's not just you type in random stuff. That's stuff that Google can find, and that's more searches that any one of your blogs might come up in. It might not just be your website. It might be a blog article that you wrote about a product or a product review that you did, and that particular article pops up in a Google result somewhere. Each blog post will be its own unique little SEO engine. So each one might come up unique because each one's typed up uniquely. It could come up in a different search. So if you're doing it, be consistent. Don't just create a few, because what you don't want to do is create a bad user experience where you've got blog posts from 2015 and nothing since. So if you're going to do a blog to build the SEO of your website, keep it consistent and don't set your goals too high. You're not going to blog every day. That's like 1% of all bloggers blog every day, is my guess. Set a reasonable goal of a blog a month or a blog a week and make it consistent, because The added the bag of stuff you open up is it good content? Is it going to create a good experience? So if your goal is just SEO, but then you forget that your blog might mess with your user experience because people are going to find it on your website, make sure that the actual user experience of the blog works and is something your customers want to interact with. Then lean into the SEO.
So when you talk about, excuse me, when you talk about quality of blog post, can you kind of flesh that out a little bit more in terms of what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's just not your fleeting thoughts. If it's relevant to your market, it's relevant to the services you provide, and it's helpful to people. So it might not be I'm driving people to my website. It might be a repeat customer that's just going through my website and they're going through my blog posts. If that content is dumb, you don't want to lose customers. So the content needs to be relevant to the field that you're in or the part of the economy that you service. It needs to be relevant to those products and those services, not just your fleeting thoughts about anything. So in the last segment, we talked about not having personal content. Your blog on your website, is it a company blog or a personal blog? If it's a personal blog, it needs its own website. It needs its own home somewhere else. If it's about the company, then it needs to be about the product specifically, not just your everyday life happenings. It's not a place for you to update your customers on what you're doing on the weekends.
Interesting. Okay. So then, is there anything else that blogs are kind of good for other than just building SEO? Like, does it help with anything else?
I could help with reputation. If they're well written and they're knowledgeable about whatever it is that you're doing, all of that is stuff that someone who wants to do their research on you before they buy your product or service, all of those articles are potential things they're going to read and make a decision off of. If you sound like you're just giving your fleeting thoughts, they're not going to treat you like a professional. But if you have very well put together content that also looks good, reads good, and is informative, then you're building rapport with your clients and potential clients.
So it really establishes you as kind of that expert in the field, right?
So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're going to do a blog, it's not just there for SEO. You need to do it well or don't do it at all.
Gotcha. So you shouldn't just be kind of throwing a bunch of keywords in there just to kind of get people to your site. That's not going to actually do anything for you. That probably will do more harm than good. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Wow. Oof.